At its peak, Studebaker was building roughly 700,000 vehicles a year and selling them on 6 continents. The company had survived the Civil War, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and a complete technological reinvention from horse-drawn wagons to gasoline engines. It was, by almost any measure, one of the most durable industrial enterprises in American history. And then, on March 17, 1966, the last car rolled off the line in Hamilton, Ontario, and it was over. Not a sale, not a bankruptcy auction, with a buyer waiting in the wings. Just over. The question worth asking is not simply why Studebaker failed. Companies fail. The harder question is how a manufacturer with 114 years of continuous operation, a brand trusted across generations, and genuine engineering talent managed to lose every structural advantage it had built, and what the sequence of decisions and pressures actually looked like from the inside. The story begins not in a factory, but in a blacksmith shed in South Bend, Indiana, in 1852. Henry and Clement Studebaker, sons of a wagon maker whose family had been working metal and wood since colonial Pennsylvania, opened a small wagon shop with $68 in capital. The timing was not accidental. America in 1852 was a country in motion. Westward migration, agricultural expansion, military supply contracts, and wagons were the essential infrastructure of that movement. Studebaker built them well enough to win U.S. Army contracts during the Civil War, a period that transformed the small shop into a serious industrial operation and established the company's foundational identity: reliable goods for working people in demanding conditions. By the time the brothers incorporated as the Studebaker Brothers Manufacturing Company in 1868, they had a national reputation and a distribution network that most competitors could not match. The company was not merely making wagons, it was managing dealer relationships, after-sales service, and brand trust at a scale that prefigured modern automotive franchising. When electricity and then gasoline began to change transportation in the early 1900s, Studebaker did not resist the shift. It entered the electric vehicle market in 1902 and the gasoline market in 1904, initially through partnerships with the Garford Company and later the EMF Company. The first automobiles fully manufactured under the Studebaker name reached dealers in August 1912. The wagon-to-automobile transition was genuinely difficult. Most wagon companies did not survive it, but Studebaker's dealer infrastructure, manufacturing discipline, and working capital gave it a running start that newer entrants simply did not have. Through the 1920s and into the post-war boom, Studebaker built cars that earned consistent praise for quality and design without ever quite reaching the mass volumes of Ford or General Motors. That positioning, premium enough to command loyalty, affordable enough to reach the middle class, was the flywheel. Repeat buyers, strong dealer margins, and a reputation built over decades kept the operation solvent through stretches that destroyed smaller competitors. By the early 1950s, Studebaker was producing cars that industrial designers and automotive journalists genuinely admired. The 1953 Starliner, styled by Robert Bork under the direction of Raymond Loewy, was considered one of the most visually advanced American cars of its era. For a moment, design leadership looked like it might be the competitive edge that kept Studebaker relevant against GM's scale and Ford's pricing power. But the crack was already there, and it had been forming since World War II. Studebaker's South Bend plant had a chronic cost problem rooted in a combination of older facilities, a labor agreement that had become one of the most expensive in the American auto industry, and a production volume that could not generate the economies of scale that Ford, GM, and Chrysler exploited automatically. The Big Three were spreading fixed costs across millions of units. Studebaker was spreading the same categories of fixed cost: tooling, engineering, plant overhead, dealer support, across a fraction of that volume. Each car that came off the South Bend line carried a structural cost burden its price tag could not reliably cover. In good years, strong demand papered over the gap. In weak years, or years when the Big Three cut prices aggressively, the gap became a wound. The 1954 merger with Packard was management's answer to that structural problem. The logic was defensible on paper. Combine two independent manufacturers, rationalize production, pool engineering resources, and create enough combined volume to compete with the Big Three on cost. What the merger could not resolve was that both companies brought their cost problems into the new entity. Packard had its own aging plants and its own capital constraints. The combined Studebaker-Packard Corporation did not achieve the production efficiencies the merger promised, and the cash flow problems that had shadowed Studebaker before 1954 continued afterward. By 1962, the Studebaker Corporation name was restored, a signal, not a recovery. The competitive environment was simultaneously becoming less forgiving. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler were investing in new platforms, new styling cycles, and dealer incentive programs at a scale that demanded a response Studebaker simply could not fund. When the American auto market softened, or when a model year missed on styling, a company with GM's resources could absorb the hit. Studebaker could not. Each correction cost cash. The company was running out of reasons to raise. The South Bend plant closed on December 20th, 1963. Production shifted entirely to the Hamilton, Ontario facility, a smaller, lower-cost operation that was never intended to carry the full weight of the brand. What came off the Hamilton line in the final years were competent, unpretentious cars without the engineering investment or model diversity that could attract new buyers or hold existing ones. The distribution network thinned as dealers, unable to sustain viable businesses on declining volume, quietly moved to other franchises. The last Studebaker automobile was completed in Hamilton on March 17, 1966. It was a cruiser, a four-door sedan. There was no ceremony recorded in the source material. Production had simply reached its end. The company did not dissolve immediately. Studebaker continued as an independent corporate entity, merging with Wagner Electric in May 1967 and then with Worthington Corporation in February 1968 to form Studebaker-Worthington. The name survived in industrial and diversified manufacturing, entirely detached from automobile production. The South Bend facilities, the design archives, the dealer relationships, the 114-year-old brand, none of it transferred into a new automotive chapter. The assets found other uses or none at all. For South Bend, the plant closure was not an abstraction. Thousands of manufacturing jobs anchored to a single employer disappeared in a city that had organized significant parts of its economy around Studebaker's presence. The ripple effects through local suppliers, service businesses, and tax revenue played out over years, not weeks. Studebaker's story became one of the documented case studies in the fragility of single-employer industrial towns, a pattern that would repeat across the American Midwest in the decades that followed. The mechanism worth understanding here is not simply that Studebaker was too small to compete. Plenty of smaller manufacturers found defensible niches. The specific mechanism was this: Studebaker's cost structure was built for a volume it could not reliably sustain, and every year it failed to reach that volume. The company spent down the margin it needed to retool, redesign, and compete in the next cycle. The merger with Packard was an attempt to solve a structural problem through consolidation, but consolidation without genuine rationalization only combines two cost problems into one larger entity. The decision to close South Bend and continue in Hamilton extended the timeline without changing the underlying economics. Each choice bought time. None of them bought the volume that would have changed the cost structure. What Studebaker built over 114 years, the dealer trust, the design reputation, the engineering credibility, was real. It was not enough to overcome a unit economics problem that had been compounding since before the post-war boom ended. The empire did not fall to one bad decision or one bad leader. It fell to a structural gap between the cost of building cars and the revenue a mid-sized independent manufacturer could generate, a gap that grew slowly, then all at once. The next question worth asking is whether any independent manufacturer ever solved that problem, or whether the American auto industry's consolidation into three dominant players was, by the 1950s, already a conclusion rather than a contest